With all the talk we've been through over the last couple of days concerning communication, there is one thing that I've spoken about in the past, but I think I ought to bring it up again, especially now that we're still on the whole topic of how do you communicate effectively with your partners, with your clients, and things of that nature. So, what I would like to go into today is when not to use written communication. So, we've gone through the whole arc about how you communicate effectively, what effective communications is, and what listening is, and how that ties into the whole process. So now, assuming that you have done everything correctly in dealing with your brides and grooms or the other vendors that you work with, let's say your fulfillment partners, if you happen to be a wedding photographer like I am, and you get your books and your your books and your frames and stuff like that made with someone else. So, assuming that you are in actual business relationship with folks and you have gone through everything to the best of your ability as we have spelled it out, there's now the issue of when not to use written communication. Now, the reason why I would like to go into this is because for those of us who are brought up in Nigeria, written communication is often our default, it's often our go to method because that is what was prioritized back when we were in primary school, all the way through to secondary school and then university. So that is sort of the default. So something goes wrong at the office, or there's a project that you're trying to do at the office. The typical thing is not for people to pick up the phone or stroll over to, Kunle's office to go and start the conversation. The typical thing is, you and your boss, you riff about it, and then you whip out your computer, and then you blast that email. However, even though written communication is going to be the default for a lot of us, there are times when written communication is going to be entirely unsuitable, and in fact, it might be counterproductive. So, one is when we are dealing with complex topics. So, you might be a wedding planner, or you might be someone who is involved with lighting and pyrotechnics. Now, for you, that is your everyday, that is your 9 to 5, so it's not a big deal. It's easy for you to say that we're going to use a 35 millimeter cable and we're going to hook it up to 50 wattage amps, and we're going to run it in this pattern and blah 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 blah. Or for a wedding planner to say, for you it's easy to say, oh, we're just managing 1,000 tables and this is the workflow and this and this and that. But the thing is, for our brides and grooms, they are normal, everyday folk, and so some of these things can be a bit overwhelming and have a lot of complexity. So, even though you're going to reduce it to writing eventually, that what your guys are going to use is a 35 millimeter cable, and so if what the event hall has is a 12 millimeter cable, that's not going to work for the lighting setup, even though you're going to have to put all of this down in writing eventually. Oh, by the way, I'm just making up these specifics. So for you lighting people, don't call me out that what I'm saying is technically inaccurate. So I'm just making things up here. So eventually, you're going to have to put these things down in writing anyway. But you're best off trying to communicate all these complex things in person or in conversations over the phone, over and over and over again. So it's not useful to do the Nigerian thing and just say, well, I put it in the email and I told her once. So, that's up to them. No, the email, the contract, whatever written form you're going to use, that's absolutely fine. You can't do without that. But trying to make sure that you hammer across that message will have to be an in-person thing or an over-the-phone thing. And remember the whole communications loop and feedback. So you're going to say it one time, you're going to get feedback to be sure that they understand. As you guys move forward, maybe after they pay the deposit, if it's a critical path that you guys have to walk through, if it's something that you guys absolutely you have to make sure that there's absolute understanding before you guys move forward, you bring it up again, another phone call, or maybe the next time you visit their office, and it's something that you have to go over in person or over the phone again and again and again, each time getting feedback to be sure that they understand, to be sure that they realize it's important, and keep going over and over until you're absolutely sure that they get it. When it comes to complex topics, just sending over that email or sending over that contract and just assuming that because you wrote it there, 35 millimeter cable, 50 amp light bulbs, 300 of them, it doesn't mean that they're going to get it. They are dealing with other vendors, could be 15, could be 20, could be 30 other vendors that they're dealing with. There's a whole lot that they're trying to handle. What you're trying to say is straightforward to you because you know everything about cables, about resistance, about about wattage, about guest flows, floor diagrams, and all those other things. It's basic stuff to you, but for them, it's highly complex. So do not only rely on written communication to get your message across when it comes to these complex topics. If you're going to rely only on written communication, then you're going to have lots of room for miscommunications, misunderstandings, and quarrels in the future. And I'm sure you guys will agree with me that in the wedding space, that is something that we want to avoid at all costs because it ends up souring the relationship. For those of us who also are involved in construction on the side, or people who are involved in housing projects and stuff like that, it's normal for there to be miscommunications and quarrels. So the fact that you quarrel with the engineer over what the work specs are doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sully the relationship. It's just the nature of that particular industry because they're dealing with a lot. You're dealing with lighting, water, cabling, cement, strength of materials, all kinds of things. So it's normal that there will be lots of misunderstandings and quarrels in those sorts of things. So in the construction agency, if they get into, industry, if they get into quarrels and they shout at each other every now and then, it's not a big deal. Life goes on. It's just nature of the job. But for weddings, it's more personal. And it's more of a personality and people thing. So the fact that we do get into shouting matches is going to turn out to be a lot more harmful over the long run. Now, another situation where you shouldn't rely exclusively on written communication is when you are in damage control or when things have gone wrong. So let's say you didn't pay attention at the complex topic stage and stuff like that, and you did your best, but the message was not passed across and there's a quarrel. If you're going to rely on text messaging to hash out the problem, if you're going to rely on emailing to hash out the problem, or WhatsApp messaging or whatever, if you're going to rely on all these things to hash out the problem, you're just setting yourself up for a lot of hurt. And because I'm sure that there's this dynamic that you guys, I'm sure you have experienced in the past, and that is your client is upset over something. She sends you that angry email or that angry text message. You're taken aback. You compose yourself. You say you're sorry in one line, and then maybe you try to explain the reason why things went wrong in the next paragraph. For some reason, it's just human nature. Our brides and our grooms, or whoever it is that is on the other side that we're trying to resolve the dispute with, for some reason they never see that one line where you said, "I'm sorry, I take full responsibility." They see all the paragraphs that you wrote below where you are trying to explain what went wrong, and then of course they write back, and the attitude is understandably, how dare you try to make excuses for what it is that happened. So it's easier to handle these things over the phone or in person, because it's hard for someone not to hear you or not to see you when you say, "Oh, I'm absolutely sorry that this thing happened. I'll take personal responsibility for it. But, unfortunately, this thing happened because, your uncle did this or your uncle did that." I'm not going to recommend that is how you handle the situation. But what I'm saying is that in this scenario now, where you are face-to-face or in person, it's hard for the person to deny or to not see or to not hear or to not feel the impact of you saying, "I'm absolutely sorry, I take full responsibility for this, I'm going to try and solve the situation," even if you start trying to make excuses later on. So these are two situations where relying on written communication exclusively is going to get you into a lot of hot water, and that is not good for those of us in the wedding and the event space. So when you're dealing with complex topic, yes, write it, put it down in writing, send over the contract, send that email, send that WhatsApp, whatever it is that you decide to do to get the message across. But understand that you will have to continually buttress it using face-to-face and using voice communications or video, WhatsApp video or Apple FaceTime or whatever it is. So you have to go over it over and over and over again. Good morning, ma. I've sent you the contract. I hope you paid attention to paragraph 6. Remember, that is when we're talking about the event hall. Remember, most Niger event halls, what they have is 12mm cables. But to run this lighting that you need, what we need is 35mm cables, ma. I hope you understand. Are you going to talk to the manager? Or can you give me the manager's phone number so I can talk to him about it? Okay, thank you very much, ma. We'll talk to you. I'll talk to you next week. And then you go through the same process next week. She doesn't send you the manager's number, and it's the same thing. Hey, madam, remember I called you last week over paragraph 6 that I sent to you. We still haven't finalized on this 35mm cable. Madam, is absolutely important too. If we don't sort this thing out now, wahala go day. And it's the whole thing over and over again. In face, in person, video, over the phone, over and over and over when it comes to complex things. Don't just shoot over that email. And then when you're dealing with damage control, it's the same. Go over to the office or to the house, have that conversation, fall on the sword, mea culpa, I'm sorry, and start damage control. If you do it over text message or over email, you're going to be involved in that silly thing that a lot of us have done, where you guys are talking across purposes and she has sent 10 emails, you have sent 12, and between both of you, you now have enough text to write a university dissertation, and you guys are not making head or tail over what the matter is. And then at some point that the bride has just even stopped reading those emails. I mean, she's angry and she's just going to ignore those emails. And as far as she's concerned, you are extremely unprofessional and you're dumb and you're silly or whatever. So don't rely on written communications exclusively when we're dealing with these scenarios. So thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer Tavishima Ayede. I will catch you guys at the next recording.